So we're going to get started with our Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee session. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. So today we have three items. First item is the resolution to authorize Montgomery County to procure lines of credit for the purpose of providing funds for the payment of operating expenses. The second item is Bill 30-20, Administration, Executive Branch, Chief Digital Officer. And the third item is the resolution proposed charter amendment, property tax limit, tax rate increases. All three items speak to the challenges that we are now facing as a county. We need to be planning our response to current and future economic conditions while also ensuring that our existing resources and positions are used as efficiently as possible. The level of disruption to our economy combined with the strain of the pandemic has put on our workforce has created something this country has not seen since the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, both of them ravaged our nation. At the same time, we must also ensure that as we create new structures to respond to these challenges, historically underrepresented and underserved communities are not left behind. So before we begin, I would like to take a moment of personal privilege and thank both my colleagues and council staff, as well as the administration staff for all the work that they have put forth on this committee since the very beginning of the pandemic. Much has been accomplished and there remains much more work to be done, but I'm confident that together we will continue to rise to the occasion. Having said that, let me turn it now to Mr. Gene Smith and Mr. Trumka to walk us through the first item, which is the resolution to authorize Montgomery County to procure lines of credit for the purpose of providing funds for payment of operating expenses. And I also want to welcome the Finance Department led by Mr. Coveyou, as well as Office of Management and Budget, also Mr. Hansen from the Office of the County Attorney, and as well as, I believe, in my list it says Paul Shelton, Bond Counsel to County Government. So let me turn it over to Mr. Smith and Mr. Tronka.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Navarro. So Jean and I are going to briefly walk you through the packet. We're not going to go through everything, just a few select points. I believe the committee members are fairly familiar with the concept of a line of credit, which of course is a type of bank loan. Do want to remind you that this, like other bank loans, are backed by the full faith and credit of the jurisdiction of the county, meaning that this is backed by our taxing authority, which makes it similar to many other types of borrowing. What makes it different from other types of borrowing, though, is how we're planning to use these funds. You know, you're familiar with GO bonds and other funding instruments. They're generally used to finance capital projects or durable equipment. What we're looking at here with a line of credit is to have funds available potentially, not necessarily, but potentially to fund operating expenses, which is very unusual. Given that, you should note that the charter speaks to this issue. Section 312 of the charter limits the use of indebtedness for a term no more than 1 year. So if those funds are to be used to meet current operating expenses, and the proposal by the executive addresses that. So using borrowing to pay operating expenses, quite frankly, honestly, is generally not advisable unless it's a period of great fiscal and economic stress, which we find ourselves in right now. What many council members, when we've spoken to them, have asked about is how does something like this, doing an extraordinary step like doing line of credit borrowing, how would that affect our credit rating? And on page 3 of the packet, we speak about that briefly. There's a more extensive discussion in the OLO report that's attached to the packet, but really there are two sides to the coin. Because this is an extreme use, in normal circumstances, bond rating agencies don't look favorably on lines of credit. In fact, some jurisdictions have experienced downgrades for over-reliance on uses of lines of credit and borrowing of that sort. But, and this is the important but, in periods like this, extraordinary measures like this are much more warranted. In fact, Standard & Poor's, one of the three major rating agencies, came out with a post-COVID statement that addresses liquidity and the ability to meet financial needs and to pay ongoing obligations. And they actually cite the absence of lines of credit and similar forms of liquidity as a danger for ratings downgrade. So the presence of a line of credit is a backup to make sure that we have the ability to pay past bond issuances, to pay ongoing operating expenses. In many cases, and in a case like this, could actually support and defend our bond rating. With that, on page 3, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smith to walk through the specifics proposal by the executive.
Thank you, Mr. Tromka. So on pages 3 through 6, the council staff highlights the sections in the resolution that will be approved by the council that will allow the county issue lines of credit. I'll hit the highlights. By all means, if council members or even the Department of Finance or MB have a quick note for one of those sections, please interrupt me since I'll be moving through each section, but I'll move through them all and then we can open up to questions and conversation about it before council staff notes 2 items of recommended amendments, one from the executive staff and one from council staff. So quickly, section 1 will describes that the limit or the maximum lines of credit that we'll issue under this authority is $300 million. Finance notes that it's possible that they may do less, but it's up to $300 million and it'll be based on actual cash flow needs that they see as we go into the end of the summer. And as they note, it's based on our largest distribution for income taxes. It'll cover mostly that, should that be delayed. Section 2 allows the county to execute as many lines of agreement as we need in order to achieve the maximum or what we need for cash flow. Finance notes they'll be executing 2 agreements likely under this authority. Section 3 does give authority to the Director of Finance to be able to negotiate these agreements. There are a lot of terms, the lines of credit, that are not just simply executing a $300 million line of credit. There are various fees, origination fees, undrawn commitment fees, etc. And council staff does note that all of these fees carry a fiscal cost, even if we never draw down on the money. But Finance did note that some of these fees will be able to be covered by CARES Act funding through December 31st. We're likely, should we choose to, be able to be reimbursed for some of those fees during the rest of this year. Quickly, Section 4 limits the maximum interest rate to 6%. Finance notes that it's likely going to be much less than that, given the current market and environment for interest rates. It also, for Section 6, allows these agreements to be renewed indefinitely, as long as the county believes we need them. But it does put the note that any fee or funds drawn from the lines of credit will have to be repaid within 12 months. As Mr. Tromka noted, Section 5 puts our full faith and credit behind these lines of credit, so the county will, if needed to, would be able to raise taxes or set a tax rate in order to make sure we pay both the principal and interest should we need to do that if it's beyond what our current revenues allow. Section 6, I think, is where the money or the rubber hits the road. It gives the specific conditions when the county will draw on these lines of credit, if we should. Specifically, the Director of Finance will have to determine that an event has occurred that has materially adverse impact on the operations or financial condition of the county, and that the Revenue Stabilization Fund either doesn't have sufficient funds or the council is in recess, is in recess and is unable to approve funds from the Revenue Stabilization Fund. I will go a quick aside here and note that pages 4 through 5 give a quick primer on our reserves. And we were scheduled to have a conversation about that, but given the time today, we just did a short primer here. Just quickly, there are 2 reserve accounts that the county has. One is the undesignated general fund reserves. I'd like to think of this as our checking account. It's based on the unappropriated amount of money we have based on estimated revenues for the fiscal year. But as revenues come in and expenditures go out, that number changes. And so it could go up or down with or without the use or authority of the without approval of the council. It'll just be based on actual revenues and expenditures. More importantly, the Revenue Stabilization Fund, as noted in Section 6 of the resolution for lines of credit, require council approval. The council will need at least 6 votes to use the Revenue Stabilization Fund, and it will need to be used for unappropriated or expenditures that have gone unappropriated. Apologize. It's expenditures that no longer have the revenues to support their appropriations, so it can't get used for things that are new. It would need to be things that have gone unfunded during the year, and that's specifically when the lines of credit would be drawn according to Section 6. Is that once that fund is either depleted or the council can't approve the use of the funds and we're materially adversely impacted, the Department of Director of Finance would be able to draw on these lines of credit. And then I'll be brief. Section 7 gives broad authority both to the Chief Administrative Officer and the Executive to ensure that we honor these lines of agreement. And then finally, Section 8 says that $300 million is less than 75% of our total taxes levied for fiscal 21, and the amount of uncollected revenues. Council staff erroneously wrote taxes there; it's revenues. I'll note that $300 million is 7% of these values according to the resolution. So with that, I realized that was a quick read through of all of the sections that are material to the council, and so I'll pause there and see if the Go Committee has any, or I'll apologize. I'll give it to Director of Finance if he has any comments he wants to make specific to those sections before the Go Committee asks their questions.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Covey.
Sure. Good morning. Thanks for having us today. I think on the two proposed amendments, I think the first one is one that we requested. It actually just makes more clear the language in Section 6, and your staff had questions about it, and so we just sought this for clarifying purposes. It doesn't actually change anything materially in the resolution, but it does make it more clear that we're issuing 12-month loans. We're buying 12-month loans, and that's it. And they are renewable, but they won't be renewable beyond a certain date. The way the lines of credit are structured, they can be added to in the future, but we're not planning on having to do that, and we certainly don't want to have to do that. This is to get us through the next year and a half, 2 years at the most. And the council staff recommendation for the sunset is perfectly fine. Also, again, we don't really want to do this for an extended period of time. We're not planning on doing it. We're not planning on using the line of credit at all. It's just insurance. It was highly recommended by our financial advisors back in March when COVID-19 hit in full force. It is a best practice in terrible times, as both Mr. Trump and Mr. Smith said. And beyond that, if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you to everybody on this. I'm fortunate that we need it, but positive that we can do it. And the way I see this is like fiscal insurance, and it's relatively inexpensive fiscal insurance. And the situation that we are in, which I think has to do with the strength of our reserves to be able to pay this off, the fact that we have the wherewithal to do this, and the credit rating that we currently have to get the rates that we can. This makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate all the hard work in the Department of Finance on this. We were briefed that this was possible a while ago. I know a lot of work has happened in the intervening months, and I think that this is a positive outcome. And I just think from my perspective, it's we hope we don't need it, but hope isn't a strategy, and this puts us in a position that if we do need it, we'll be in position to do it. I think in terms of the bond rating agencies, the question is, unprecedented times, can you meet the moment that you're in? And I think this puts us in a strong situation to be able to meet the worst case scenario. And that's really what fiscal responsibility is about. It's about not taking advantage of unprecedented actions in normal moments, but having the ability to take actions when necessary in highly abnormal moments. And there's no doubt from a fiscal standpoint, from an economic standpoint, we are in a highly abnormal moment right now, and we have to be prepared to do it. I just had one question, one thing that we talked about previously in terms of how this is reported on our financial reporting. Just wanted to clarify, my understanding is based on the outstanding principle that's actually drawn, but I think it'd be helpful for us to just publicly say how this will be noted that we're doing it, and then reported in terms of how we use it. So I don't know if Mr. Covey or other staff could clarify that.
Yes, I'm sorry. I would ask Karen Hawkins if she could help with that one.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The undrawn amount will be disclosed in the footnotes as an available line of credit, and as an if we make draws, the principal outstanding would be reported as a liability.
Great. Okay, that's my understanding. I just wanted to clarify so we're all on the same page, and you've now said it publicly. Appreciate that. And yeah, I think this is a good example of collaboration in tough fiscal times to work together to be able to meet the circumstances that we're in. And again, thankful to my GO colleagues, thankful to council staff and executive staff for putting us in a strong position to meet this, hoping that we never have to use it. So thank you.
Council President Katz.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for their hard work. Councilmember Friedson pretty much has said it all, and let me just say that I agree with what he has said. This is prudent. We hope we don't use it. It's like life insurance. You hope that it's never used, but you know that there's a time that perhaps if you do, that it's there. And I think that's extremely important. Government is in the service business, and we need to make certain that during those times when it is uncertain for what our revenues will be and our collections will be, that we can have this bridge. Not to, in any way, we will not abuse it, I know, but we need to do it. So I certainly am supportive, and I'm most appreciative of all who have worked on this.
Thank you. Yes, I also want to add my appreciation. I do want to say that I like the way that we went through this process in terms of giving us a heads up and explaining to us, early on why this was necessary, and then the process you would go through, the things that you would look out for. And I think it speaks volume. I've said this before many times, to our outstanding finance team, who is always looking ahead to see how we can best position ourselves. It is a little different because I know during the last recession we didn't do anything like of this nature, and I think it calls and it highlights the fact that this is an unprecedented moment, and that this is why we have to do whatever we need to do to ensure that we protect the county at the same time that we position ourselves to provide the services that our residents expect. So I think this is prudent, it's proactive, and I think that the two amendments in particular are really great. I think they add to what we should be considering and position ourselves in a really good way. So with that, are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Is there a motion?
I move that we pass this with the two amendments.
All right, so moved by Council President Katz and second by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, raise your hand so we can be on record here. So it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate the finance team, OMB, and everybody who's worked on this. Thank you. Okay, moving right along, we have item 2, which is an expedited bill, 30-20, Administration, Executive Branch, Chief Digital Officer. And Ms. Wellens has prepared a packet for us. And we do have Ms. Kasiri, who is the CEO, and Ms. Roper, who is the Director of our Department of Technology. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to Ms. Wellens to just talk briefly about the bill, and then we'll have Ms. Kasiri, if you have some comments, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation with Ms. Roper. Of course, we also have Dr. Torregas, who staffs the GO technology policy area. So, of course, we'll also look towards you, Dr. Torregas, to give us feedback on this particular bill. All right, let's start with Ms. Wellens.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Navarro. Good morning, Council President Katz and Councilmember Friedson. So, as the Chair stated, before you is expedited bill 3020. This was a bill that has been requested by the county executive, and it would do some reorganization in the executive branch specifically. It would take the position of the Chief Digital Officer, which is a non-merit position, and move it from the County Executive's Office to the Department of Technology Services, excuse me. So there are, of course, some, and just by way of background, this position of the Chief Digital Officer, as you know, was developed last year in 2019 by legislation placed in the County Executive's Office. So again, this bill would allow it to be transferred to DTS. There are, of course, some organizational and fiscal questions the committee may have in connection with this piece of legislation. The representatives from the executive staff, Ms. Roper and Ms. Kasiri, can probably speak to those the best. From the staff perspective, the one thing I wanted to note is that there are some technical amendments that should be made to the bill. So in the event that the committee moves forward with recommending approval of this bill, staff would recommend that it adopts the non-substantive technical amendments as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what I'll do, I'll go next to Dr. Torregas, who is the one who staffs us on this issue, and then we'll turn it over to the administration. Dr. Torregas, anything you'd like to add?
Just very briefly on page 2, I tried to summarize in the organizational question segment number, paragraph 2, that what's really in front of you is an organizational shift. The benefits of having the Chief Digital Officer position in the CAO's office, as the bill originally prescribed, is that gave that position the authority stemming from the CAO's office across all departments. When you move it over into a particular department, that then diminishes the policy overview of that position. On the other hand, the reality is that when the council approved the CDO position in the CAO's office, the leadership in DTS was very different. We now have Ms. Roper, who's a very dynamic and very knowledgeable person, and someone who can really make use of this Chief Digital Officer position and associated budget. So that's what's the organizational question in front of you. As of now, I very much endorse this shift, again, given the ability of our new CIO to move it forward and establish countywide policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kasiri, anything you'd like to add before we turn it to Ms. Wilford?
Thank you.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Ms. Kasiri?
Sorry.
Yeah, you go.
Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Nothing, just by just saying that how thankful and proud we are to have Gail Roper, who's the head of our technology services, who actually is a forward-thinking leader, collaborative. So I'm just she can actually answer all your questions. So just wanted to kind of just let you know that. Thank you for confirming her for us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Roper, tell us why this is a good approach.
Well, basically, what we're looking at is an office within my department that will actually be the Office of Digital Transformation. And we've seen some of that happening throughout the preparation for the teleworking and the pandemic exercise. But this position will develop a portfolio of simply processes that we currently have that are manual. A perfect example, I like to give examples, and a good example of that is seamless docs and the way that we've been able to automate processes that for, I would say centuries, but I would probably say years, have been manual, that both impact productivity and cost. This position will be responsible for that portfolio of opportunities. We saw great opportunities during the time we were preparing for our productivity and moving forward with the pandemic exercise. And then we see a lot of that now as it relates to recovery. We've been able to automate at a low level, I would say at a low level, but I would say that the opportunity is now based on the fact that we have to understand and have a strategy moving forward as to the new norm. post-pandemic. So this position will not only lead a team of individuals that will be able to apply low-code, low-cost efforts across the enterprise. The departments have technology people that we typically collaborate and innovate with. We also work in collaboration with the chief innovation officer as it relates to innovation and business process reengineering. This position is really critical to the new DTS, not the old DTS, but the new DTS and the operations that we would like to impact the entire enterprise. And I think the council president said that, that we are an organization of services. And what we want to do is make sure that our constituents, that citizens who interact with the county, understand the county's innovative brand, and that they are able to come in and do the things that they need to do in a way that is modernized and digital. So this is really the Internet of Things for Montgomery County.
Thank you, Ms. Roper. Okay, let's see. I have Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief on this because this is another one where I don't think there's much disagreement. I will note, and Ms. Kassiri has the unfortunate background and knowledge, and my colleagues and Mr. Torregas, that I raised some concerns about the way that this position was created, one of several positions, new positions that were created in the new administration, and it puzzled me significantly, although I begrudgingly voted in favor, that there was a position that we were creating that was both to do data security and to do technological innovation in this space. And it seemed to me that there's one part of that job is mitigating risk, and the other is taking on risk. And I never quite understood how that would be balanced out, and that never really made a whole lot of sense to me. So Ms. Roper, who knows tremendously more about these issues than I have, has forgotten more than I've ever known, and certainly knows a lot about these issues. When you approached me and said, I looked at the org chart, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and you explained it in ways that I didn't know, and why, but philosophically it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I know technically on your end this makes a lot more sense, and just appreciate the fact that you've taken a look at the organization, figured out what we need to bring county government into the modern age and modern era. That's the type of government that county residents expect and deserve. I see your role and your department as such a key part of that, and I think your perspective from where you're coming from is so important. I look forward to seeing what this position does, what you do, some more changes, I hope, and expect based on the initial conversations with you that are in store. And this makes a whole lot of sense to me, and I'm happy about the fact that we're doing it, and pleased to give credit to the leadership, the county executive, for allowing you to make the changes needed to both be willing to come on board and to be willing and able to do the job that we so desperately need you to do to bring county government into the modern era. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Ms. Roper, I know we had an opportunity, as my colleagues have as well, to hear your thoughts and the reasons why you felt that this would be really important. I know that when we were having preliminary conversations about this particular position, one of the things that kept coming up, and I know it was feedback that we received quite a bit, especially from the private sector, was this notion that they really thought that government, that county government, could play a role in also facilitating, innovation in this space, and also being, in a way, a catalyst in some, in some instances, for opportunities that would then facilitate for our private sector to be part of, innovation or just general opportunities to, be nimble and be quick about that as well. And they observed that they didn't feel that had happened before. So can you just briefly share, now that this position will be, in your department versus it being more, generally a position like Dr. Torregas had said initially, can you share some of your thoughts about how this position would also help that, provide that liaison with the private sector in order for us to take up, advantage of certain opportunities?
Certainly. So I would say this first. I would say that this position and then the mission and vision of the department had to change. It's not just this position. I'm looking forward to presenting to the GO committee on some other initiatives that I've been able to work on and push forward as it relates to the impact. I know that many of you were very interested in the Ag Reserve and being able to impact what was happening there from a technological standpoint. But we have to have an individual that is very much focused on public-private partnerships, grant funding, opportunities to collaborate for economic development, from an economic development perspective. And one of my, as you know, Mrs. Navarro, one of my major focus, and that's on equity and technology. So those are the kinds of things that I know that we will have a major impact. We already are in small ways. What I want to do is to enhance this role and this position to be responsible for reporting directly to me, having the resources that this position would need. And some of those resources include people who work with certain applications, people who are able to business process re-engineer, people that are able to build relationships across the organization, and then manage some of those efforts as they align with the county's goals to be more technologically oriented. And then a lot of it has to do with really positioning this role to have impact. More impact than just strategic impact, because a lot of times strategies go on the shelf. And what we don't want to have here is that this position be a strategist that has no resources in order to tactically move things forward. My entire strategic plan is about tactical movement, how we get there from where we are. And I think I know that this position is going to be critical in getting that done.
Thank you so much. And I will echo my colleagues' comments and expressing my appreciation to the leadership in the administration, county executive, for really moving this forward and allowing you to make that assessment and position us. I look forward to further conversations in this committee about the work, and as you say, not just the strategy, but actually the results that we are looking for. So let's see, Ms. Wellens, you said that there were some minor technical amendments. If you can just point those out to us so that we can take a vote.
Certainly. So the technical amendments are described at the end of page 2 of the staff memorandum under item number 3. There's non-substantive amendments. They are, in a nutshell, the original bill had inadvertently included a position in the list of executive positions that is no longer there, the chief equity officer. So that was a scrivener's error that needs to be corrected, but it's not a substantive change.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other comments from my colleagues?
Nope.
All right, is there a motion?
I so move. I guess there is the one amendment.
Yes, the amended bill. All right, it's been moved by Council President Katz, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor to adopt the amended bill, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous for this committee. So we really do appreciate all of you and look forward to conversation at full council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now on to item 3. This is the resolution, proposed charter amendment, property tax limit tax rate increases. Let me see. We do have, of course, Ms. Wellen, who prepared a packet. And I believe that we have Mr. Hanson, County Attorney, Mr. Latner, Chief Division of Government Operations, County Attorney's Office. Basically, let me just start by saying that obviously we have Mr. Drummer, of course. In my opinion, we have a serious problem. As we know, there is a amendment being put forth by Mr. Ficker, that if it passes, would place unbearable limits on revenue enhancements. I think the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests have shown a light on the great disparities within our communities, and these disparities must be addressed. Last year, I proposed and the council adopted an economic development platform. And, we are to make this county business friendly. And I believe that Mr. Ficker's charter amendment will not help that. We also worked very hard in March to quickly, as a council, make a statement that we would adopt a continuity of services budget, because we understand that this particular pandemic has just put unprecedented restraints on our revenues. So after we did that, we believe saved about $70.3 million from the county executive's budget proposal. And we also felt strongly about not approving the executive's proposed tax increase. And we also had to hold the line on employee raises, because all of this together we felt was an initial way to begin to address this unprecedented fiscal challenge. Just earlier, we approved, recommended as a committee, the adoption of a $300 million line of credit. And now we're in the middle of a revised spending plan that the executive has sent us, cutting about $66 million. I think all of this is basically telling us how fragile the situation is. And it is clear that this particular amendment that Mr. Ficker is putting forward, what it does is just really ties the hand of any future council from ever really being able to raise revenues. Just makes it a lot more difficult than it already is. And we know that there are some jurisdictions like Prince George's County that passed in 1978 similar anti-tax charter amendments, and that had significant impact in the quality of services that they were able to provide, because they had to eliminate quite a high number of services and lay off quite a number of employees. At this moment, that Prince George's County Council is proposing the elimination of that property tax cap. And because it is clear that we all understand the need to exercise fiscal restraint, but there are some extraordinary moments when we need to do whatever we can to provide the level of services that our county residents have expected. So one of the things that we have looked at is, what is it that we can put forth that continues to respect our residents' desire for us to be very careful and thoughtful and disciplined in in considering things like property tax increases, but at the same time allows us to continue to have a level of flexibility. That balance is a very, very delicate balance, and it's not easy to achieve. But I want to thank Councilmember Friedson, because I think after a lot of conversations, he began to put forth, working with our staff, a particular proposal that I think makes a lot of sense. It's one that the GO committee is actually putting forward, and it's my understanding that it has 6 sponsors on the council. And we believe that this is important because it helps us continue in that spirit that we affirmed last year of working on economic development in order to make this county as vibrant as it can be. I have always said from the very beginning, when I decided to put myself up for an appointment for the Board of Education in 2004, that I firmly believe in an aggressive economic development strategy that creates jobs, that creates a vibrant economy, specifically because that gives us enough then resources to invest in the most vulnerable and make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind. I think that this proposal really addresses that, and that is why I decided to support it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Friedson, who worked very hard in drafting this, so that he can, give us the parameters of this particular proposal, and then I'll turn it over to, I believe, Ms. Wellens, who has prepared the packet, and Mr. Drummer, and then we'll engage in a conversation with the administration and take a vote. Councilmember Friedson.
Well, thank you to Chair Navarro, to Council President Katz. This is the GO committee's proposal to put forward. I've been really pleased to work with you on this and so many other issues. And I really do think that we are at a watershed moment for county politics, just like our country's politics, just like so many other issues. This is going to be an inflection point of where we decide to go as a county and as a community. And that's why I think that this is the right approach to balance the clear interests of the voters and of the public, to put us in a position to grow our economy, to continue to provide resources for those who desperately need it. That's what Montgomery County is. That's what we do. And to be able to continue to attract residents and jobs and workers, which is important as well. The proposal that we have forward is exceedingly simple. It keeps the existing 9-vote requirement to increase property taxes, but changes the convoluted and arbitrary charter limit cap on revenues. It just replaces it with a very simple, clear, and consistent tax rate from year over year, which is exactly how an ordinary voter thinks of taxes, how an ordinary business thinks of taxes. What was my rate last year? What is my rate this year? If it goes up, it's an increase. It's no more complicated than that, and requiring the 9-member unanimous vote of the council, which is the existing protection that the voters have previously voted for. I firmly believe that there is a choice about the future of the county on the ballot this fall, and we're going to have to choose as a community, as a county, between fiscal responsibility and fiscal insanity. I think we're putting forward a fiscally responsible approach, and I am hopeful that we can pass something on the ballot, put something on the ballot, and allow voters to have that clear choice. And, this really reflects what the reality of the voters is currently, and what the reality of taxpayers currently is. Nobody understands what the charter limit is and how it's calculated. In fact, there continue to be debates and discussions of what should and should not be included based on a 30-year history of how it has been calculated. That is not a good way to do public policy. That is not a good way to do tax policy. And make no mistake, this is framed frequently as an anti-tax effort to create the charter limit and then to continue to add and double down on what has been the existing revenue cap charter limit based on inflation. But it really isn't primarily an anti-tax proposal. It's really an anti-growth proposal. It's a bet against Montgomery County. It's a bet against our economic growth. It says basically it matters less how much you grow, it matters more how much inflation grows, which is not the appropriate way to set tax policy. It's not good for residents. It's not good for businesses. It's not good really for anybody, and it's neither economically sound nor fiscally sustainable. And it's high time, I think, that we have a tax policy that reflects the reality of how voters actually understand their property taxes, and that we have a policy that's aligned with our goals, which is to grow the tax base before we grow tax rates, so that we all work together to create new revenue in a way that is fiscally responsible and sustainable. And really, that's what this is about. It's a very simple proposal. It is how most people think of their taxes, and most people think of these issues. And so far, we have so confused the voters, I think, on the way that we calculate property taxes, that we have done them a disservice, we've done the county a disservice, and we've really held ourselves back. And for the first time, I think we have an opportunity to reverse that, to change that, to make it clear, to make it consistent, to make it simple, and make sure that we have a tax policy that is aligned with our economic growth, allows us to grow infrastructure like school construction and transportation infrastructure along with that growth, and allows us to move forward as a county so that when the private sector succeeds, the public sector succeeds. That when there is growth in businesses, there is growth in county revenue, so that when certain people do well in our community, that others can do well in our community, and that we can use a rising tide to lift all boats and use the levers of government to provide the type of resources and programs and possibilities for residents in a way that makes sense. To me, it is no more simple than that, and I hope that we can push it forward. I will just close the initial part of this conversation. I'm hopeful today that we can agree on language. I think we've agreed on what the concept is, but agree on language as it will be presented on the ballot. And I do think that the most important thing for us to determine within the legal framework of the charter and of Maryland state law is to make sure that voters can clearly understand what they're voting for and can demonstrate their clear intent on the ballot. That's what this is all about. It's their government. This is their tax structure. This is their tax policy. And we need to make sure that we have something that they can clearly understand, reflect what their priorities and interests are, and so that we can move forward together as a county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. I will also note that this proposed charter amendment was introduced on July 14th, 2020, and the lead sponsors are Councilmember Friedson, Council President Katz, myself. Co-sponsors are Council Members Albornoz, Rice, and Weimer, and the resolution is tentatively scheduled for a public hearing on July 21st, which I think that's been confirmed, and a final vote on July 28th. So just wanted to set that for context. All right, so I think let me turn it over to Ms. Wellens. I know Councilmember Katz said he wanted to speak after the presenters. So let me turn it over to Ms. Wellens to walk us through the packet and what are our decision points, and then we'll have a conversation as well with the administration regarding the executive's also proposed amendment, and then we'll take a vote. Ms. Wellens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you and Councilmember Friedson described the resolution already with a great overview, and also described kind of the nitty-gritty and mechanics of the proposal. So I'll try not to repeat you. Essentially, as Councilmember Friedson stated, the proposed charter amendment under this resolution would switch the current focus of the so-called charter limit under Section 305 of the charter to switch the focus from limiting revenues to instead limiting the tax rate. And all current council members would have to vote affirmatively to increase the property tax rate above what it was the prior year. And you can see in item number 1 in the staff memorandum, bottom of page 1 going in, or I guess it's just, bottom of page 1, shows, the current property tax rate. And essentially, and I should try to be clear because this is a little bit of a complex calculation, that the property tax rate under the current law and also under the proposal, we have many property tax rates. So essentially what we're talking about is the compilation of those rates. The Department of Finance is available to describe it further, but essentially it's very transparent in the annual budget. You can see that the rate that we're talking about for FY21 was set at $0.9785 per $100 of assessed value on real property. So that would be the tax rate that would be set in stone, except for the fact that, if there was an agreement, like under the current law, if there's agreement of all current council members, that could be exceeded, for instance, in case of emergency. So that's essentially the proposal. There are, as you described, there's the petition proposal by Mr. Ficker. The county executive had also introduced a proposal, and we do have Mr. Madaleno, Mr. Cubby, available to describe that to the extent you want to discuss that proposal. And the one item I should note that was somewhat late breaking, and so therefore didn't make its way into the packet, speaks to the issue that Councilmember Friedson was describing about the specific language that would appear as the ballot question, and also the language that would appear in the charter once the amendment was adopted. So yesterday you should have received proposed language that council staff, including Mr. Drummer and Mr. Smith, and I worked with the county attorney's office on to attempt to make the charter language clear so that it would be transparent both to the voters and to the county agencies, how Section 305, how the tax limit would be implemented. And then also we attempted to have some straightforward, clear language for the voters for the ballot question. And happy to talk about any details. And again, there's Mr. Smith is available as are members of the executive branch. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me turn it over. Is it Mr. Covey or Mr. Madalino to describe what the council president introduced on behalf of the executive?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all three of you and your colleagues for taking this issue up. When the county executive was talking about this in his budget forums last fall, and the need to fix the charter because of the impact of the revenue cap, who knew that we would have I would hazard to say all of you interested in making this change, especially to the revenue cap, which disables our county in a way unlike certainly any other county in the metropolitan region. I never thought I would say this, and certainly I've had the opportunity to interact with you, Chair Navarro, for many years, that I would look at the Prince George's limit and wish we had that as opposed to this limit, because in an era of no inflation, minimal, record, historic low, or even stagnation, the inability that that causes, the limitation that causes on our ability to address issues. I mean, you brought up so many important issues in your opening statement: the focus on racial justice, the focus on responding to the coronavirus pandemic, the need to focus on our economic development. All of those things are hindered by the revenue cap. And so that's why I appreciate your work and certainly Councilmember Friedson's work on trying to bring everyone together to say and educate the community about how the revenue cap needs to go because of its perverse impact on our county. In the last 3 years alone, when you look at the chart that the council staff has provided on page 2, where it shows the change in the rate, you can see, obviously the council had to take action in 2017. If that rate had just stayed in place over the following 3 years, the county would have taken in potentially $240 million in additional revenue. That could have gone to address the achievement gap in the public schools. That could have gone into transportation improvements to help economic development. That could have gone to fully fund our employee retiree health care trust fund. That could have put our reserves in a better place. There are so many things we could have done if our structure of government was in line with all of our neighboring Maryland counties, because everyone else has the ability to set a rate and leave it. So I applaud you all for moving forward on this process, and certainly Councilmember Friedson's proposal is a huge step forward in fixing this situation. And so it's a wonderful day when Councilmember Friedson and County Executive Elrich are on the same page. So I do think there are some the county executive's proposal, much like this proposal, would remove the revenue cap and allow you all to set a rate and then leave that rate in place just like the income tax. The county executive also, in his conversations with people around the county, wanted to put forward a concept of providing some greater surety to property owners, especially the homeowners of the county, as to how their bills might change based upon a limitation on their taxable value As you know, state law caps taxable values from going up in any one year by no more than 10%. Counties have the ability to lower that to any number between 0 and 10%. It just has to be a whole number. So it has to be 1, 2, 3, for example. The county executive wanted to propose a 3% cap on the taxable on the increase in taxable assessments for owner-occupied residential properties. That is something that you can do in statute. You do not need a charter amendment to do it. So I think many of you are intrigued with this idea, but recognize that it may have some added consequences of appearing in the charter, and the complication of explaining it as to, that this is a different limitation on your bill as opposed to something that drives down the rate. So he is open to a compromise on moving forward between the amendments. I know there is, I think, some concern about in this amendment the use of the weighted rate. And the reference to the weighted rate, which is something that does not appear otherwise in county law, but is an administrative function of how we sort of set that an advertised rate. If you use the weighted rate, I've been trying to think of an example. If the decision of the council one day was to create an urban district in Bethesda that provided both for capital expenses and operating expenses to help with the central business district. If you set that rate, if you potentially had to increase that rate in order to satisfy the needs of the urban district, if the weighted rate comment stayed in the charter, it would force you to potentially reduce other rates, and that competition is something that I think is obviously a valuable conversation in the council, and I no doubt that would occur. But I don't know if you want to tie that up in the charter. And if you said that a supermajority, and I know the county executive would much rather have a supermajority of 2/3 or 3/4 than all current council members having to vote on it. But if you didn't have the reference to the weighted rate and just put in the tax rates, then you could make those decisions individually about whether or not you wanted to create a new district, an urban district for Bethesda or Germantown or Olney, or if you wanted to rethink the need to expand the fire service and the fire tax rate, because when you include, again, the weighted rate, any action on one rate would require a counterbalancing reduction in another rate. And I think that is a concept that you may want to pause and think of whether or not you want to actually put that in the charter, as opposed to just having all of our various tax rates. And the public may not realize we have a general rate, a fire, transit, rec, all the different park and planning rates, and then there are an occasional rate for a special taxing district within the county, like the White Flint district that is going to fund transportation improvements in that Central Pike district. So anyway, that's a little bit about the county executive's proposal, his rationale. I think a little bit about our thinking of the proposal before you. But once again, I want to stress how great it is that I think the executive and the council are all together in trying to come up with an approach to our revenues that addresses the public's desire to have a high bar to changing revenues, while at the same time not disabling our local government's ability to meet our challenges in the 21st century. Yeah. And in this decade, especially at this moment in time when I think we all agree how important a functioning local government is to a community, is to its residents, is to its business community, and its ability literally to survive from day to day and figuratively to survive as a community. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And once again, thank you so much for taking this, all of these proposals so seriously and trying to put forward an approach that's better for all of our residents.
Thank you so much, Mr. Madaleno. I think that was very well stated. Let's see, I've got Council President Katz and then Councilmember Friedson. Council President.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all who are working on this, especially Councilmember Friedson. You know, tax legislation many times is just plain confusing. And people many times ask, are you going to raise my taxes or are you going to lower my taxes? Don't look at every word. That's all they care about. Bottom line, you're raising it or are you not? But of course, in the last budget, the FY21 budget that we just passed last months ago, we did not raise the tax rate. The county council did not raise the tax rate. And we're certainly very aware of the fact that during a crisis, our revenues are going to be down and our expenditures are going to be up. We've said over and over again that there are people who need governmental services that have never needed governmental services before. And it certainly is going to continue until this crisis is over. And we don't know, obviously, when that will happen. So the whole idea of tying something to the inflation rate, you know, it sounds like, well, that's some way to protect something. But candidly, if you look at your own personal finances, if you go to the grocery store and you see that the price of whatever goes up much more at times than the inflation rate. It's also at times it could go down depending on the volume of what is being done and all of that. Nothing that you buy is tied to the inflation rate. Nothing. You have the choice of buying it or not. It's not tied to the inflation rate. Government, as I've said earlier, is in the services business. And I often joke, standing next to former County Executive Leggett, when it started to snow, and I was standing right next to him, and his whole demeanor changed because he started saying, you know, this is costing me $1 million an inch. This is costing us $1 million an inch. And what are you going to do? You have to do it. If it snows, you have to take care of the services that are needed. And it's the same thing and anything else the government touches. You can't look at the inflation rate on how much it's going to cost us because it snowed. We have to clear our streets. We have to have it safe. We have to be able to clear our streets so that a fire truck or a police officer or whoever can get to someone for their public safety. And we have to have places for libraries and oh, by the way, there's schools as well. We need to make certain that our investment for our future, our young people are an investment for our future. And we need to make certain that they do have the necessary funds to get us to where we need to be. So I think it was council chair, committee chair, who said the word flexibility. Maybe it was Councilmember Friedson. It was somebody said the word flexible. We need to be flexible. We need to have the ability to get what we need to have, not just spend somebody else's money, but actually get them the services that they need. We need the flexibility. It needs to be in such a way that people are understanding of what we're trying to do. And I think this legislation as proposed by Councilmember Friedson and everyone else who's been involved with it gets us where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, just very briefly. First of all, I did want to thank Mr. Madaleno and the county executive, and I think it was framed well. I mean, there is broad agreement that the current system doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, and that is true if you're a business person and you have a tax policy that isn't aligned with economic growth, and you desperately want to see the county do more, which we're trying to do in terms of growing our economy, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're somebody who believes that we need to have the ability to generate revenue in a number of different ways, particularly at a time when so many people are struggling. Regardless of where you are on that very broad mainstream spectrum of appropriate public policy and reasonable tax policy, there is widespread agreement that the system we have right now is not a very good one, and doubling down on a system that doesn't make a whole lot of sense is a very bad idea. And that is really the conversation that I think we're in, and I really do appreciate that. I think my perspective is nothing unreasonable about what the county executive and what Mr. Madaleno has shared here. The 3% cap is something that we have the ability to do. I think intrigued is a good word for it. I think perhaps when Mr. Madaleno and I met, that was probably a word or close to a synonym of the word that I had used about this particular proposal. I do think we have the ability to do that already. There are questions about who impacts, who benefits, how does it work, how is it implemented. I mean, there are significant aspects of public policy. I would personally prefer that be done through the standard legislative process rather than the charter, but it is certainly a very thoughtful, reasonable, significant proposal put forward, and one that I hope that we'll continue to discuss as we move forward, and appreciate the way that that was put, and the fact that this issue is put forward, because it is a significant question. Now, I would love for it to be a problem in Montgomery County where our assessments of property values are going up so quickly that we have to address that. I think we have other issues right now that we really have to address in terms of growing our economy in an appropriate way and having a tax policy that supports and helps to produce and incentivizes that growth. And I think the council's proposal is a little bit more aligned with that effort. But we're all in 90% agreement here, and working out the details, frankly, in my opinion, of a system that currently doesn't work, the prospect of doubling down on a system that doesn't work not being a particularly good idea, and a question of what is the best path forward to have a system that actually incentivizes the types of things that we want, and allows us to provide the type of fiscal responsibility and the type of resource that we need to have a community that we want, to have a county government with services that our residents expect and deserve. And I think that this is a really important conversation. It's probably not one that a lot of people tune into because it is in the weeds of what the county charter is and what tax policy is. But I doubt there are more things. I can't think of very many things that we will do over the next several years together in this current administration with this current county council that will be more important to the future of Montgomery County than what we're doing in this committee session and what ultimately goes on this ballot. And so I just wanted to note that, appreciate that, and think it's an important conversation that we're having. And just the last point for the weighted average that Mr. Madaleno, I'd love if it's okay with the chair to turn to the staff, because I believe that the lawyers have been discussing what is required. We have to balance two things. I think it's very important, and I think the council has yielded to the advice of counsel in many ways here. But we want a balance to make sure that the ordinary voter can read a clear statement and understand what it means and express their intent for what they want in their county government and the tax policy that funds that county government, and make sure that we are satisfying what the Maryland state law and the county charter requires for this type of role. My understanding is some of that has been worked out, and there might be some additional questions and conversations, but I think it would be helpful if the chair is okay to have that discussion.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see, is it Ms. Wellens that will lead us on this? Yes.
I will try to, Madam Chair. So in terms of the language, so there are two issues, as you know. One is the amendments that would be made to the text of the charter, and then the other issue is what language should appear on the ballot as the ballot question for the voters to weigh in on. And in terms of the ballot question, there are, as Councilmember Friedson noted, specific requirements that basically it comes down to, the description needs to be objective. We're not trying to sway the voters one way or the other. We're trying to present the issue to them concisely and clearly. So really the language needs to be clear and it needs to be objective. And under the state law, the county attorney for each county is the one charged with making sure that the language meets that criteria. So the language that has been suggested by staff in combination with working with the county attorney's office is with respect to the ballot language itself. The language would explain that this would be the meat of it. It would say the council shall not levy an ad valorem weighted tax rate on real property to finance the budgets that exceeds the ad valorem weighted tax rate on real property approved for the previous year. It would go on to explain that the weighted tax rate is calculated by determining the sum of each property tax rate adjusted by the proportion of the assessable base that is charged that tax rate. And I know that sounds a little bit complex, but essentially it's under our current charter limit. What the Department of Finance does, and they can certainly, please chime in if I'm misdescribing anything, but the current approach and the approach that has been in place since the late 1970s when the charter limit originally went into place is to use this, what we're calling weighted tax rate, to say that we can't, the council can't go above that unless it has unless all council members agree. This is the current system. You can't go above that weighted tax rate in a way that would result in revenues that exceed the prior year revenues plus inflation. So the weighted tax rate is not a new concept, but we would be describing it more clearly in the charter so that everyone going forward can see how to calculate it. So that would be, so again, that was the language in the charter would essentially state, you can't raise the tax rate unless all council members, over the prior year, unless all council members agree. And then the question, what you'll see is question A, the proposed ballot language would attempt to say, clearly and objectively, this would be the meat of the question for the ballot. It would say, it would be a property tax limitation to amend Section 305 of the county charter to prohibit the county council from adopting a tax rate on real property that exceeds the tax rate on real property approved for the previous year, unless all current council members vote affirmatively for the increase. And then it would go on to describe the current charter limit that is being replaced, and would use the current, it would describe the current revenue limit that we're replacing. So that's the kind of a general description of what the language would do. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions about it, or, if you need more context, others may be able to chime in as well.
Thank you. Councilor Friedson, you have a question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate the updated language. I think what would appear on the ballot reflects, allows somebody to reflect what they want very clearly and to understand it. Just to clarify, ad valorem, for those who are watching, means by value. I think it's not necessary because I don't know of any other way to assess property taxes that I've ever heard of. Nobody has ever assumed that a unit that, a studio apartment that's worth $250,000 and a single family home that's worth $1 million would pay the same per unit cost in property taxes. I don't know of any jurisdiction anywhere in the country and any common person who would assume that would be the case. So I just wanted to clear that up. Ad valorem is not what most people are familiar with, but it's basically just Latin for by value, which is how all property tax is assessed everywhere. And I do agree, and I appreciate the county attorney who's the one who suggested this for the ease of the voters to actually understand what we're talking about, that while weighted average is an important technical term for the way that the property tax is determined. It's not a commonly understood idea, and it is confusing. I was just wondering if perhaps county attorney can just explain that, since it was your suggestion. This didn't come from the council. This came from the county attorney, who ultimately is the one responsible for putting, for developing the language by state law of what would go on the ballot. So I just think that would be helpful, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to turn to him anyway.
Okay, great. Well, smart mind.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. So I will just reiterate that the standard that we are hoping to achieve has been set out by our Maryland Court of Appeals, most recently in a case from 2008, in which a group called Stop the Slots were organizing to oppose the constitutional amendment that appeared on the ballot then to legalize gambling in Maryland. And the court said basically that the ballot question should be complete enough to convey an intelligent idea of the scope and import of the amendment, and ought not to be clouded by undue detail or misleading tendency, whether of amplification or omission. And for me, the idea of eliminating from the ballot question a reference to the weighted tax rate made sense, because we already currently calculate the way the tax rate is set to comply with the charter by using a weighted system. And so the proposal that the council is considering to put on the ballot is not a change in that direction. So I didn't feel that it was necessary for the voters, in order to make an intelligent choice, to get into the weeds about how the tax rate was actually calculated. So that was my thinking on this. This rule that we're supposed to follow is easily stated. It's not always so easily applied. I don't pretend to have a monopoly on the best way to implement that standard. So I really appreciate council staff's conversation with me to kind of gently bring me to an understanding that the weighted tax rate is not a change, and we didn't need to potentially confuse the voters by getting into that level of detail.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hanson. I really appreciate that. So I don't have any other colleagues in the queue, so let's see, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I think council staff was trying their best to be as deliberate and straightforward and as possible to make sure that we're putting as much information. And you are being helpful in saying, what actually should be on the ballot. And I think working together, we've gotten to a very good and thoughtful place to meet the objectivity standards, which is our duty and our obligation here, but also to make sure that we have something on the ballot that reflects what the policy is going to be. So I am very pleased with it. I would be happy to move that we adopt the council's proposal, the GO committee proposal, as the three of us have sponsored, with the understanding of the proposed language on the ballot as discussed by Ms. Wellens, that has been vetted by the council attorneys and the county attorneys, and move that forward for a vote.
I second it.
Excellent. So before we vote, I did see the Mr. Drummer did want to add something very quickly, and then Mr. Madalino. So Drummer.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify and make sure we're all on the same page. That you're all on the same page. Doesn't matter if I am. Just that Mr. Madalino talked about a slightly different way to do it. He talked about not being able to raise any of our 17 tax rates, I believe, without 9 votes. In other words, don't look at the weighted tax rate overall, look at each individual tax rate. I think that's what he was talking about. And what you're suggesting, and what you're about to vote on, I guess, is using the weighted tax rate. And I just want to make sure you understand that there's a difference in what he was saying and what you're voting on, which is fine. I mean, I think what Mr. Friedson had proposed was the weighted tax rate, and we were just talking about whether you had to use the word weighted in the description on the ballot, and we concluded you don't, but that's what you mean. So some ways it would have to be reflected that that's what you mean. I hope I didn't confuse people more, but I just wanted to, there's really two ways to do it.
Yes.
I think you might have succeeded, Mr. Drummer.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I mean, if you said, there's 17 rates, so if you say you can't raise the weighted rate, you just look at, you weight them all. You add the sum of the weight of each rate based on the amount of property, the assessed value of the property that it applies to, and you come up with, 97 cents that we did. But,
yeah, I think, my understanding, I appreciate what Mr. Madalena was saying. I think that the packet and the county attorney have both spoken to the fact that we have an existing standard of a weighted average tax rate, and unless we, in any proposal, either the one proposed by the county executive, the one being proposed here and now by this committee, we would have to specifically state what it is. I mean, based on my understanding of what the county attorney has suggested, by not specifically mentioning something that people don't understand anyway, the understanding and the expectation is that the status quo, the existing standard, will remain, which I think is a very reasonable, for the same reason that, we're not changing the way property tax collection occurs by value. So including a Latin term ad valorem that most people have never heard of is not necessary. So just to be clear, since I made the motion and since it's this committee's proposal, the understanding that this is a reference to the weighted average tax rate, which is the existing standard that we have always had, but it does not necessarily need to be included because we aren't changing that in the ballot language to meet the objectivity standards and to reflect the fact that we are not making any change to the way that is being done.
Thank you. Mr. Medellina, very quickly, because we have a motion already and seconded, so we're about to vote.
Yeah, and Mr. Drummer brought up part of what I wanted to say, because I wanted you to think, in the actual charter language, you are inserting the weighted rate concept, which is something that we do in order to make it easier for the taxpayer to understand what the overall tax rate is for the county, but that it is not in my understanding, it is not a concept that exists currently in county law. It is an administrative function that we do in order to inform the taxpayer of what the overall, to give them an understanding of what the overall county rate is, and that you're introducing therefore into the charter an administrative concept, and that is you could be tying your hands or your successor's hands in an unexpected way by including the weighted rate in the actual language of the charter.
Okay. So there is a motion, it's been seconded, and there is language that has been proposed in order to make this a lot more understandable by the public. That is what's before us, correct? My colleagues still good with that?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So without objection, we will adopt the proposal as amended, and it will go to full council, where we'll, I'm sure, have additional conversations. But this is what the GO committee is putting forward. Is there any objection? All right. So without objection, we have adopted this particular proposal as amended. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your very hard work. Really appreciate it. And we're adjourned. We're done with all the items. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.